I imagine that most of you watching this video immediately recognize this film still. It is, of course, The Wizard of Oz, classic 1939 film. I have it here because we can't assume that people 50, 100, 200 years from now, if this photograph has been stored properly and exists in 200 years, are going to actually recognize it. We assume that everybody was going to recognize this image, but things change. I'm going to talk today about the importance of labeling your collection in some way. We get a lot of people asking if they should write on their photos, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the different options you have. All right, this next set of photos are images I found in a thrift store. This one of this lady has no information on the back, but these three are, I believe, press photos. So they have wonderful labels giving us much more information about the subjects in these photos. So I thought they'd be great as an example to start talking about labeling photographs. The downside is the method they used. They would type labels onto paper, which were probably not archival paper, and then they would glue it to the back of the photographs and then file it away. That part is not particularly archival, so I want to tell you right off the bat, don't stick things to the back of your prints to label them. Let's talk about how great these are. All right, this one tells us who's in the image, and then it describes what's going on in the image. American and British convalescents enjoying a boat trip up the Nile River to the Delta barrage given them through the courtesy of Nahas Pasha, Prime Minister of Egypt, Cairo, Egypt, April 23rd, 1943, and then the name of the photographer is what I'm assuming. So having that information gives us a different viewpoint on this. We know who's in it, we know when it was taken, we know a lot more about the image. All right, so this image is not a particularly good image. It was taken from a bad vantage point. It's not very well lit. But one thing is if you scan your images at a high resolution, then you can enlarge them and you can manipulate them with photo software and get more details. So there's actually more than just the dancers on stage. There's band on both sides of them behind. They're kind of muddy. We could get a lot more information if we did that. The back has the name of the dancers and then a long description of what we're seeing. Krakow's dolls, as they called themselves, dancing during the stage performance Polish Parade, which was presented through the courtesy of NAFI at the Post Theater of an American camp. The performers were made up entirely of members of the Polish army and have toured throughout the Middle East. They were all professional actors before the war, and when Poland was invaded by Russia, many of them were taken prisoners, but were later released when Poland and Russia became allies. Their presentation was excellent, and it's one show the audience will not soon forget. The cast of Polish Parade are soon to make a film named 2 Grains of Sand and will be directed by two most famous Polish directors, Michel Wazinski and Konrad Tur. And this was taken May 1st, 1943. And so as you can see, all that information makes the photograph a lot more valuable. I showed you this because I want you to realize that labeling your collection, especially if it's well, any collection, but your family, who's in it, where it was, what was the occasion, or even a memory that you can tie to the person, makes that collection all the more valuable. If you're going to write on the back of your photographs, then we recommend using pencil. And we're going to talk about the difference between fiber-based and resin-coated photographs. Resin-coated photographic paper, also called RC paper, refers to a support material in which the paper base is coated with 2 thin layers of polyethylene. The top layer of polyethylene, which will receive the photographic emulsion, is pigmented white, while the layer on the back of the support is clear. These coatings make the paper nearly waterproof and drastically reduce wash times. Introduced commercially in the 1960s, RC paper rapidly became the dominant support for black and white and color photographic prints in both professional and consumer markets. In 1968, Kodak introduced Kodak Ectacolor, the first commercially available RC color paper. By the mid-1970s, nearly all of the chromogenic color papers manufactured had an RC support. By the late 20th century, billions of RC prints had been produced worldwide. Even many non-silver digital prints used resin-coated paper. So if your photo is from the mid-70s and later, it is most likely printed on RC paper. Because it's plastic, you can kind of feel it. I'm not, obviously not with gloves on, but it has a sort of a waxy, plasticky feel compared to fiber-based. This was obviously printed and taken quite some time ago, before 1970s, right? And it is, even though it's glossy, so it has that same shiny appearance as this modern print. It's definitely on a fiber-based, it doesn't have the plastic coating on it. So now we're going to talk about the different materials you need to write on fiber-based versus RC photographs. Okay, a number 2 pencil is very popular with archivists because it's reversible and it's not going to damage the photograph. If you're going to write on this photograph, write on the back, not on the front. Might seem obvious. Write on a firm surface. And always write along the edges to avoid writing in the middle of the image. It's a found photo. We have no idea who it is, but we could make something up. So I just wrote a name and a date. Next up, labeling RC photographs, which have the plastic coating on, as we talked about. Let's try writing on it with the number 2. If you've tried it before, you know it generally doesn't work. It just doesn't want to write on plastic. We sell 6B is a set of 2 and 4B is a set of 2, and they come with these cute little caps. And these are good for writing on RC papers. It works quite well. One of the things you have to be careful with these graphite pencil sets is that they are solid graphite and they just have like a plastic shell around them to hold them together, and so they're very fragile. It rolled off the table earlier and just snapped in 2. So now I have 2 very small pencils. Okay, so we talked about pencils. Next, let's talk about ink. Alright, we discourage you from using ink to write on the backs of your photos. Inks are susceptible to fading, ink will bleed and blur if the photo ever becomes wet accidentally. Non-archival inks are bad all around, so just don't use them. If you must use pen, use an archival one, like the Sakura Pigma Micron pens that we carry and you can find in every art store. They look like this, and they come in many different nib sizes. Again, if you're going to write on the back of a photo and you're going to use ink, do it along the edge. Because it's archival ink, it shouldn't damage the paper, and it certainly shouldn't fade, and it shouldn't smear. But you can't erase it, so if you make a mistake, you can't fix it, whereas with the pencil you can. Okay, we talked about using pen on fiber-based paper, but I wanted to talk to you about using it on RC paper, and it's not a great idea. Because in this example, I just wrote on this in pen and then used my finger to wipe across it and it smeared. I think it's going to happen even if I were to let this sit for a while. I guess we can do a test. So I let this one sit for, I don't know how long. I wasn't timing it. Maybe it's been an hour. And then I tried using my finger to smear it and it didn't smear. So lo and behold, these pens will actually write on RC paper if you have the patience to let them dry. It's your collection and it's your decision. We just try and help you make the best decision. So we recommend using pencil, but if you use a pen, use an archival pen. In the next episode, we're going to talk about labeling enclosures and cardstock inserts for your collections rather than writing on your photographs.